I saw the warning signs too late. You never think your marriage will end with a courtroom and a war chest of lawyers. At least I didn't. I thought I'd married the love of my life. Mark was everything I thought I wanted. Ambitious, charismatic, laser-focused. From the moment we met, he made me feel seen, special, chosen. He told me I was his anchor. But anchors, it turns out, are useful until you want to set sail without them. We'd been married almost 8 years when I felt the shift. It started slowly. Missed dinners, emergency meetings, at odd hours, late-night phone calls he'd take in the garage with the door closed. At first I blamed myself. Maybe I was being clingy. Maybe I wasn't doing enough. Then I found the email. It was short, a single sentence buried in his sent folder, carelessly forgotten. We're still on track for the filing date. She has no clue. No greeting, no name, just that. My heart stopped. I stared at the screen, numb, as the pieces clicked into place. Mark wasn't just planning to leave me. He was orchestrating it, preparing for months, maybe longer. And the worst part, he was setting me up to walk away with nothing. I didn't confront him, not yet, because in that moment, frozen in our home office, laptop glowing like a lighthouse in a storm, I realized something. If he was preparing for war, I needed to become a general. The first thing I did was call a lawyer. Not a cheap one, not someone from Yelp. I called Olivia Novak, a name whispered in high-rise circles, the kind of woman who could peel a Fortune 500 CEO like an orange and leave him smiling. I told her everything. The suspicious financial moves, the delayed paychecks from his company, the shell corporation he registered last year that he said was for tax purposes. Olivia leaned back in her chair and said something I'll never forget. He's laundering assets, he's hiding income, and he thinks you're too naive to notice. She smiled coldly. Let's prove him wrong. The next 4 weeks were hell. Every morning I played the dutiful wife, smiled, packed his lunch, kissed him goodbye. Then I'd lock the bedroom door and scan documents. Bank statements, LLC paperwork, Venmo transactions he thought I wouldn't notice. Mark had created a network of lies so intricate it took Olivia's entire team just to map it. Offshore accounts, untraceable crypto transfers, even payments to a private investigator, one he'd hired to dig up dirt on me. He wanted to claim I was mentally unstable. He was preparing to paint me as unfit, to keep the house, the cars, maybe even our daughter. He was going for full custody. That's when something inside me snapped. Not fear, not sadness, clarity. If he wanted a war, I'd give him one. But not with screaming, not with chaos. I would take everything he tried to steal and flip it against him, quietly, precisely, irreversibly. Mark and I met at a conference in San Diego. I was 26, a mid-level product manager presenting on user psychology. He was 33, an investor looking for his next rocket ship, as he called it. I didn't think much of him at first. Too polished, too smooth, the kind of man who used charm like a currency. But he didn't come on too strong. He listened, asked good questions. When he told me my presentation was the most grounded and strategic he'd seen all day, I believed him. I wanted to. 3 weeks later, we were dating. 6 months after that, we moved in together. 2 years later, we were married. I thought I was building a life with a partner. I didn't know I was being recruited into a performance. Mark wanted a wife who made him look good. I was a box he could check. Smart, attractive, respectable, capable, but not too ambitious. He encouraged my career until I outshined him in a Q&A session at a VC dinner. That's when the little corrections started. You were a bit sharp tonight. Maybe tone it down in meetings. Yeah, you don't want to sound like a know-it-all. He wanted a showpiece, a prop, and I played the role for too long. I should have trusted my gut. There were signs. His sudden business trips that left no receipts. The way his phone never rang around me. His insistence on handling all the tax stuff and downplaying every question I asked about our investments. But the worst part? He made me feel grateful to be kept out of the loop. You work so hard, he'd say. Let me carry this part. Now I realize he wasn't carrying me. He was burying me. The man I married was already preparing my erasure before I even knew we were ending. The day I found that email, something in me changed. It wasn't just rage. It was resolve. Olivia, my lawyer, had her team dig deep, and what we found would make a forensic accountant sweat. Mark had opened 3 LLCs in other states using aliases derived from his middle name. He'd funneled over $750,000 through those shell companies, using consulting payments from a client that turned out to be his friend's dummy corporation. And one of those LLCs? It held partial ownership of our home. He'd secretly refinanced the mortgage, pulled equity, and shifted control into an entity with his assistant's name on it. A woman 20 years younger who had never even met me. My home. The place where I brought our daughter home from the hospital. He had stolen it right out from under me. I confronted him that night. He walked in late, tie loosened, smelling like bourbon and fake confidence. I was sitting in the kitchen, papers neatly stacked, Olivia on speaker. He froze. "What's this?" he asked, voice too casual. I looked him dead in the eyes. "Proof," he tried to spin. Gaslight. Act confused. "Babe, you're overreacting. You don't understand how corporate structures work. That's normal tax strategy." But I just slid the voice recording across the table. The one where he told his friend over the phone, "She'll be lucky to walk away with the clothes on her back. Everything's in my name now. She's too soft to fight." He stared at it like it was a snake. And for the first time in our marriage, he looked afraid. But I wasn't done. A week later, I got a knock on the door. 2 men in blazers. Private investigators, they said. Hired by Mark. They asked vague questions about my mental health. If I'd ever acted erratically. If I had a history of depression. One even asked if I had ever been violent. I realized then he was trying to have me committed. Mark wanted to fabricate instability, to file for sole custody, to isolate me and win everything by default. That was the moment I stopped playing defense, because if he wanted a war, he had just declared it. I never cried in front of him. Not once after that night. I'd spent years giving him my vulnerability, and now I realized he saw it not as intimacy, but as leverage. So I stopped being the woman he could read. I played my role to perfection, quietly cooperative, emotionally composed, too naive to pose a threat. Meanwhile, I was assembling my army. Olivia brought in a forensic accountant, Hannah, who looked more like a barista than a financial bloodhound. But within 48 hours, she had traced over a dozen suspicious transfers Mark thought were untraceable. The best part? Mark had been sloppy. He'd used one of our joint credit cards to pay for a subscription to a document vault software, then uploaded files to that vault, thinking I'd never find the trail. What did we find? A prenup invalidation strategy, drafted with his friend's law firm. It hinged on mental instability and neglect of domestic responsibilities. A draft affidavit, claiming I was emotionally abusive, never filed, just waiting. A contingency plan to liquidate assets and move to a no-fault state to minimize alimony risk. This wasn't a divorce, it was an ambush. And I had just discovered the battlefield. I knew the timeline was tight. He'd file soon, and once he did, any aggressive moves from my side could look retaliatory. So I struck preemptively. First, I had Olivia file an emergency protective motion based on the PI visit and the voice recording. Then I got a temporary restraining order against Mark, not for violence, but for fraudulent financial behavior with the intent to harm a dependent spouse. The judge granted it within 36 hours. Mark was legally barred from liquidating anything. His accounts were frozen. His shell corporations flagged for audit. And the assistant whose name was on the LLC that held our home, she got subpoenaed. And when she realized what was happening, she flipped. That conversation was delicious. "I didn't know he was married," she sobbed on the phone. "He told me you were separated, that you were violent." I said nothing, just let her talk. I didn't want to be part of this. He said it was all legal. I just signed where he told me. And then she emailed us everything. Bank records, messages, even a folder of screen recordings. Mark coaching her on how to lie if I ever got nosy. That was the final nail Olivia needed. Because now we weren't just looking at divorce. We were looking at criminal fraud. Mark tried to fight, filed his petition late after learning I had already filed and preemptively protected every major asset. His filing read like a screenplay. Accusations of abuse, mental instability, neglect, manipulation. But he didn't know Olivia had already preemptively submitted a full psychological evaluation I'd undergone quietly during those first few weeks with a licensed clinical psychologist who wrote in her official summary, "Client is of sound mind, no symptoms of personality disorder, mania, depression, or psychosis, exhibits high emotional regulation and strategic planning capacity." In other words, not crazy, not unstable, just smarter than him. Then came discovery, the legal process where both sides have to disclose evidence. And when Mark saw the 200-page binder we submitted, he tried to settle. Offered me half the house, said I could keep the family car. He even wrote a handwritten note. "Let's keep this civil for the sake of our daughter." Civil? He tried to erase me, and now that the house of cards had collapsed, he wanted mercy? Olivia smiled when I showed her the note, then slid across the table a different offer, full custody, 100% of the house, 60% of shared assets. And no NDA. Mark refused at first. Then the subpoenas hit. The IRS launched a preliminary investigation, and 2 of his business partners pulled out of their deal, citing reputational risk. He signed within the week. The courtroom was quiet that day. Mark looked thinner, paler. The swagger was gone, replaced by a twitch in his left eye and a hollow stare. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just signed the papers and walked out free. I walked out of that courthouse into the brightest sunlight I'd seen in months. It felt like I was breathing real air for the first time, like I had been underwater this entire marriage, holding my breath, pretending I wasn't drowning. And now I was free. But Mark? He was still trying to swim with bricks tied to his ankles, bricks he tied himself. In the weeks after the judgment, I didn't hear much from him. By then, his accounts were gutted. His companies had been quietly flagged by regulatory agencies. And his name? Well, Google had a field day with that. Olivia had sent a quiet tip to a journalist she trusted, nothing exaggerated, just the truth. Investor creates fake companies to defraud wife in divorce, uses assistant as a financial proxy, fails spectacularly. The story spread like wildfire in niche finance blogs, then LinkedIn, caught on, then Twitter. Mark tried to deny it at first, posted a cringe-worthy apology that read like it was written by ChatGPT. I made mistakes in love, not business, but no one bought it. One of his partners publicly replied, "You made mistakes with fraud, not love." His reputation was radioactive. A few months later, I got a call from a blocked number. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something told me to pick up. "Hey," a voice said, small, tired. It was Mark. Silence stretched between us like a tightrope. I didn't think you'd go that far," he said. "That far?" I nearly laughed. He tried to have me institutionalized, tried to take our child, tried to financially erase me, and now he wanted to talk about lines? "I didn't go that far," I said. I just held up a mirror. He didn't respond, just breathed heavily for a few seconds. Then, "Do you ever think about us? About what we had?" I closed my eyes, thought about our first date, our first apartment, the moment he held our daughter and cried. Then I opened them. "No," I said, "I think about who you turned into and who I had to become to survive you." And I hung up. Mark didn't bounce back. He tried to start another company under a new name, new logo. But investors Googled. People whispered. The finance world isn't as big as people think. He faded. Quietly, like a man slowly realizing the stage he built was actually a trapdoor. As for me, I didn't just survive, I rebuilt. I relaunched my consulting business, right, under my name this time. Clients came, then more, then press. Turns out people love a woman who walked through hell with receipts. I didn't need to shout. I just showed up. Every single day. The best part? My daughter. She's too young to understand what happened, but she sees the difference. Mom smiles more now. Mom dances in the kitchen. Mom doesn't cry in the laundry room anymore. We bake cookies on Fridays. We paint our nails blue. We talk about space and science and how the moon controls the tide. And one day when she's old enough, I'll tell her the truth, not just about her father, but about her mother, how she didn't crumble, how she didn't let fear write the ending, how she turned betrayal into blueprint, and how silence, when used with precision, can be the loudest revenge of all. The final twist. It was a year later when I got the final piece of closure, a small envelope, no return address. Inside, a check, $2,500, memo line. For the therapy you probably needed. No signature, no note, just that. At first I was furious. It was so Mark, smug, passive-aggressive, like he thought he still had power. I almost tore it up. But then I cashed it and booked a weekend trip to the coast. Ocean view Airbnb, fresh oysters, spa massage, and that night, I sat on the balcony, wine in hand, and toasted the skyline. To healing, to survival, and to making your enemy pay for your peace.